Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is Monday, November 3rd, 2025 at approximately 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. And it is a mighty balmy day where I live. That's where I'm wearing short sleeve. And it's incredible considering it's November 3rd. But hey, it's mountain biking weather, and I'll try to get out there after this 689th truth bomb. Actually, this is the 690th truth bomb, which covers a span of about 3 years. I think it's going to be 4 years this January when I started this odyssey with this particular round of information that, thanks to you guys out there, has gotten some pretty decent support. In fact, some really great support. But considering the information I have, it is just a drop in the bucket compared to what has to happen. So I thought I'm going to try to reconfigure a little bit of my sort of juxtaposition to try to really make these things a little bit shorter. Food for thought. I've probably said that many hundreds of times. But at the same time, I just kind of have to get to the core of the situation for the folks that don't have a lot of bandwidth or time. And, I always think about, because I've had, a lot of experience in marketing, professional marketing, working for some of the largest advertising agencies in the world back in the early phases of my career. And I remember how we did it back then versus how things are done now. But if I were to think of, the target audience for what it is I'm trying to reach, it's literally everybody who's not a MAGA or a Nazi or somebody who would betray freedom and liberty and justice for all. Somebody who believes in equality, somebody who believes in dynamism, and so on and so forth, which I think is many, many tens of millions of us. But further to that point, just within the whole demographics of, how people can interpret things and understand how the world works. Really, you should probably to fully gestate the platform. You should be in college or out of college, but it's probably helpful if you've been around the block, especially if you've been around the block over the course of the last 20 years and you understand how things work because you can see patterns. Because therein lies what somebody recently mentioned to me who I interact with frequently. He says he's steeped in reality. And his hope is to connect with somebody who is able to make him further, I know, cogent on the way things are and in a way that can help him be effective at being the resistance to the things that he obviously knows that are in play with Trump and this sycophantic, insane, corrupt administration of vile stupidity and ignorance and complicity and betrayal and everything that goes with it, treachery. It's unfreaking precedented in our country's history. I know there's some other times that we could certainly look to and be critical and appropriately so, but nothing like this. And I think I want to start this sort of framing with what I think millions of us had, bore witness to last night, and it might be on our radars this morning. Donald Trump was interviewed by Norah O'Donnell on 60 Minutes, and it was a freak show. It was a joke in every measurable way. If I were Norah O'Donnell, I would have approached things slightly different. But of course, I'm not Norah O'Donnell, and there's a reason why she was in that position. Now, many of you might be aware that 60 Minutes has been co-opted by sort of the larger brand management of Paramount, of which that's the parent company. And this wouldn't be the first time. In fact, there was a fantastic movie that portrayed this, but the reality back in the 90s, as personified by the film The Insider, starring Al Pacino, was there were scientists within the tobacco industry that knew exactly what it was doing and wanted to call attention to it, and they were snuffed out by the media. In this case, 60 Minutes, because the parent company was connected to other apparatuses that were connected to, RJ Reynolds. And therefore, the story was quashed, which bore out the scenario of, okay, well, what is free speech in a democracy, particularly in the notion of, the fourth estate, by way of what the founders had envisioned to hold power to account. Because everything about the United States was an experiment against history to create separation of powers, to create the Bill of Rights and liberty, and the Constitution to protect the American people, that the American people would then protect by participating in elections to hold power to account, because the founders knew, because they were learned men, that throughout history that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And as I frequently say, that came from 17th century France, from a French libertarian philosopher, a guy by the name of Bastiat, had proclaimed that when a group of men discover plunder, they create a legal code to authorize it and a moral code to glorify it. And that's how you ensconce power. So what we're in the midst of isn't new so much as it's new for the United States and its bombacity, its stupidity, its absolute audacity, and the failure of all of this checks and balances, including the Fourth Estate, to be able to hold power to account. And that was all on display in this ridiculous interview on 60 Minutes. And of course, for those who know, 60 Minutes, well, I should say that CBS was a part of a mega merger inside the machine of Larry Ellison, who is now, I think it fluctuates daily between he and Elon Musk for who is the richest person on earth. But Larry Ellison, obviously the CEO of Oracle, a huge software and a tech company that's been around for decades, whose largest client is the CIA, and whose son runs, really a pretty damn great division within Paramount before the merger and acquisition, a company called Skydance. But because of the merger and acquisition, which is to kind of centralize more of the control of media, that has now led to purchasing Time Warner's CNN, and then TikTok in the social media space, and more to come. And we've already had massive, proliferation of the monopoly of corporate media for decades. And in fact, the latest version of this, and in fact, all of this, is what spawned me to become the producer of The Con. And that is the revelation of the largest criminal conspiracy in the history of the world, that we offered for free for the last 3 years on thecon.tv, which has been scrapped because a lot of what I'm telling you. I don't want to go into details because I'd have to speculate a little bit too much, but I'll try to circle back to that later. But when you destroy investigations in the free media, you destroy the truth, and you destroy the ability for the American people to hold power to account. That's the synergy. That's the way it was designed, and that's what we were for 248 years, and millions of deaths that were sacrificed to protect that. That we're now in a situation where this idiot monstrosity, blubbering fool, who to me looked like a turtle, I have to say. And I posted that on Blue Sky, and a lot of people who love turtles were very offended. So I said, okay, let's just change that to Joffrey Baratheon, who reminds me of Joffrey Baratheon. Who? Trump, if you're not tracking. Trump basically was what reminded me of a seventh grade fool, right? Some sort of bully rich kid who comes into class with his teacher, and his teacher says, look, you got to do better because I caught you cheating, or X, Y, and Z. And he's like, you don't know who my dad is. That's who I was looking at. And there was a potpourri of questions that came down on Venezuela, on some crypto and CZ, which Trump said, I don't know who he is. He doesn't know who CZ is. His sons are involved with crypto and everything CZ, and CZ was just, released, or I should say pardoned, in this, in addition to what a lot of people are speculating might shortly see something like P. Diddy and Ghislaine Maxwell. The absurdity of just insane criminals involved with racketeering and sex trafficking and all sorts of horrific stuff. In fact, it's probably important to just pause and make this point about CZ. Right before the No Kings rally, which is now 3 weeks ago, the administration vis-a-vis Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, and of course, Stephen Miller, the Chief of Staff of the White House, were proclamating that anybody who showed up for No Kings was supporting terrorism, that Antifa is a fascist organization. Of course, anti-fascism is the American ideal. That's why we went to World War II, and a million GIs fought in, well, I was about to say died. It's more like 700,000, maybe it was 400,000, and in World War II carnage that had 70 million deaths, by the way. Oh yeah, but the GIs and alongside our allies ended up crushing Fortress Europe and the Nazis, which were ultimately the fascists, and also invaded Italy. And of course, the GIs are the face of anti-fascism. So how dare Stephen Miller, this squid Goebbels Jewish guy who fancies himself this propagandist genius, who's the chief of staff, who was created in a petri dish by Breitbart billionaires, is pro, proclamating, and alongside everybody's favorite grinder, religious freak, who's Speaker of the House, who won't allow the representative from Arizona to be sworn in so that they can vote on the Epstein files. These guys were in the process of doing what Goebbels had taught us 70 years ago. The lie has to be big to get everybody involved, because then people are complicit and people conform. This is humanity. This is psychology. This is what people have done throughout history, and we're in the middle of it, and they're just playing the same notes that have happened throughout history. And it's so incredibly obvious, but at the same time, circling back, well, this was the point about mentioning those two in context to the No Kings rally. They were like, yeah, you're associated and you're pro-Hamas. The reason I brought all of that up is because CZ was laundering money for those who were supporting Hamas. That's how you move large sums of money that can't be detected through crypto. And Donald Trump just pardoned him and said he doesn't know who he is. He also hit on Norah O'Donnell. He said, hey, she brought up, what's going to happen if Zohran Mamdani wins the mayoral race of New York City, I think on Tuesday or Wednesday of this week, which has gotten obviously national attention. And he said, Zohran's a communist. I'm going to prevent money from going to New York City because he's a communist. First of all, I don't think Trump knows the definition of communism. He had proclaimed, I think a week before No Kings, that communism's been around for 1,000 years. The guy is an utter idiot who knows nothing. I swear to God, he's probably got a 7th grade education at best. And he's in this position being asked questions by 60 Minutes gold level, journalist. No, she's not. If I were in that seat with Donald Trump, you would have seen a completely different interview. I'd probably go after, considering we were just talking about CZ, and even though she did bring this point up briefly, but she talked about, Don Jr. is in a transaction with Qatar. I think they might have been conflating things, or maybe I am, but based on probably AI and $2 billion of Qatar, but in crypto, and then the crypto to the family and whatever their crypto company is, and it's off the top of my head. But he's made $2 billion on that. $2 billion from somebody he doesn't know. Let me ask you a question. Would you remember somebody that gave you $2 billion and why you knew them? Yeah, it's absurd. But because of Barry Weiss, the chief editor-in-chief at CBS, and the power behind the scenes with Larry Ellison, and I'm a producer and I know how things edit, they just had a specific agenda that you're going to ask these questions that, a lot of pundits are going to say, why didn't you ask this and that and the other? But you're going to make it so fast that you can't really get any context and you can't get any answers, while at the same time enduring Trump saying something along the lines after she in fact, she pulled the stunt that everybody does on Trump, which was when he was talking about Zohran. She said that a lot of people say Zohran is charismatic and he's got a lot of appeal, just like you. And he just turned to the camera and he kind of smiled wildly to her. And he says, well, I think I'm a lot better looking than Zohran. Don't you? I swear to God, he was literally hitting on Norah O'Donnell. And is she an attractive woman? Yeah. That's our president in his cacophony of lies and things that are destroying everyone, including potentially 42 million children 42 million people, and millions of which are children, that are going to lose SNAP benefits because of the government shutdown and everything else that doesn't affect him. And that's what I would have asked him. I'd be like, hey, you pocketed, I think it looks like north of 5 billion, somewhere between 5 billion and 10 billion in revenue. We don't know what that net profit is, but we're talking billions of dollars plus a free 747. All of this is against the emoluments clause. All of this is illegal under the Constitution. It's all bribery. It's pay to play. We could easily find ways to, with the Supreme Court has said, yeah, no, there is quid pro quo is not legal, but you got to prove it. And that's the job of 60 Minutes and Norah O'Donnell. And they just asked basically softball questions. I mean, she tried, and he talks over her and all that sort of thing in the time. And you're your outfit, your paycheck depends on you not blowing it up with Donald Trump, quite frankly. So it was just a dance, and it was a ridiculous, absurd dance, but it's just like every other dance that's happening in America. Now, you might look at this if you're seeing me for the first time, you might be like, okay, this was on my feed. I'm paying attention. You're not saying anything that I don't know, but you haven't said anything really super worthwhile. I don't even know who you are. And so why do I want to listen to you? Because I've got the $71 trillion truth that affects everything that nobody understands. That is everything that is happening at this very moment, first and foremost. But if you ask that question of me, ask yourself, what do you know about the structure of our government? What do you know about how laws are made? How do you know how they're executed? What do you know about the degrees of the investigations that happen and how they get investigated? And ultimately, the purpose of the media and the truth and all of the other elements that we depend on, again, to go back to what the founders had envisioned after a revolution against tyranny, King George III, and of course, I like to throw in the East India Trading Company, which was the most powerful corporation in the world at that time, because it was backed up by the king and the crown, and in the empire, which was the redcoats and the Royal Navy. Okay, that's how it works, man. That was central power, you know. But what we did separately from that was we said, get the hell out. We're going to take care of ourselves, and we're going to create a democratic country in order to form a more perfect union. And we've been trying to figure it out for 248 years with different elements of good and bad, good and bad. But this is off the charts crazy train. Okay. And so what is the $71 trillion truth in context of what Norah O'Donnell wasn't able to get out of Donald Trump for basically being on the upside of $5 billion illegally? First of all, what are you going to do about the $5 billion that a president who gets paid $460,000 a year has already pocketed in the first 9 months of the second administration that he stole to what? Bulldoze the East Wing, which of course is now leading to something like $350 million in construction. What? What? Do you have any idea how much $350 million is? Does it not, the light bulbs go off and go, wait a second, who's in charge of the money? And if it's not coming from taxpayers, who's it coming from and for what? And what are the overruns and where's the money going? And all of the forensics that would allow you to understand the pay to play scheme that the SCOTUS had said that, you know, that's the way it's got to be done. And so who am I? I'm the guy that did all of that with the world's largest racketeering conspiracy in history, financial fraud that never ended, that devoured the world, blew up the world, and has never ended. I just said that, but it's been going on for 14 years, and it's going on now, exactly the way it has been. Just slightly a little different. Let's just call it abbreviation, not abbreviations. Just kind of like the alphabet soup of all of these different designations within all of these different peripheries of how things are rolled out in our financial system that you don't know exists. And I do. Abbreviations is what I was trying to say. And what that means in context of how the sausage gets made in any commodity, whether it's housing, whether it's cars, whether it's medicine, whether it's airplanes, whether it's, just whatever product. I mean, it all follows the same pattern, and each one varies slightly in terms of how the sausage is made. But I knew how the sausage was made because of my work and the con. And if you reach out to me privately, I know where to send you to where you can get it and you can pay for it. It was free for the last 3 years, but now we didn't have enough action on it. And there's a lot of reasons why it might be pulled. But the bottom line is all Americans buy are lies. And that brings me back to why I'm trying to reconfigure a little bit of how I normally approach these things. Because, first of all, we're 3 weeks out, after no Kings, and there's not a national consensus or plan. The only thing that the Democrats are kind of hanging their hat on in the midst of this government shutdown and all of the outrage in the midst of it all, not to mention waging war and blowing fishermen out of the water and throwing people in jail and getting rid of the Constitution, habeas corpus, and due process, and turning us into an authoritarian state, which we are, unlike what the New York Times said last Friday, which is, are we becoming one? And all of their answers were yes. This was by the New York Times op-ed. But the fact is, no, we are. And I hear every day guys like Mark Elias, who's former AG of President Hillary Clinton's campaign, and very connected and well known, and a guy that's driving really all sorts of response against gerrymandering and all of the different things that the Trump administration is going to do to steal the election again. Just said this morning two things that I thought were important in terms of this context of this conversation. One is the law is dead. And that's what the people I work with every week on the new Untouchables said, I don't know, 4 months ago, that the law is dead. And he also said that legacy media is a train show, out of control circus of stupidity and carnage because, and he used some more choice words than that, because they're not doing their job. And again, I answer both of those things by just being me, because that's what I did. I spent years and years and years doing the investigation that the Department of Justice, the FBI, the Securities and Exchange Commission, AGs around the country, as well as other acronyms and abbreviations for different regulatory agencies that weren't able to put the full picture together of the 2008 Great Financial Crisis. The reason I did that story was, one, I was crushed in the 2008 Great Financial Crisis, but it created an odyssey that just never ended because I kept pulling the threads, and it just became a bigger and bigger, just this incredible atmosphere. I think of it a lot of the times as the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo's fresco of creation, and really all of the other biblical stories. But in this particular case, it was just like, oh my God, that's how that works. This is what they did. This is how they weren't stopped. This is who did what, when, and how. This is all of the different manifestations of all of the elements that created the biggest RICO conviction or RICO racketeering enterprise in the history of the world that was never held to account. But it was the aftermath that really made me more startled than anything I could ever imagine. What I found after putting all of these pieces together, that was a crime that would ultimately destroy tens of millions of people. On the low end, we know the amount of people just based on demographics and just the amount of carnage that happened with the numbers that I've been able to suss out over the years, that it's at least 30 million Americans that were directly impacted by the 2008 Great Financial Crisis. But there was literally tens of millions or more around the world. We're talking about collapsed companies and pensions and people that weren't tied to the housing industry directly, but their retirement savings were, and the way they invest in certain things, not to mention communities and countries, literally. And so the media had never done the job to tell the full story. And that wasn't my intent, but that's what happened. But then I studied and understood and learned the configuration of our financial system that makes all of this possible, in addition to our government apparatus, how things work, and again, all of these types of things. And again, my background was I studied political science and journalism in college. I've been a producer for decades. I've been inside some of the highest, most powerful companies on the earth. And I've been around a lot of very wealthy people in my day. And I just know how things work. I've been around the block. And what's going on right now that you need to understand, going back to the Zoran Mondani scenario after the comment by Donald Numbskull Trump, Numbnuts Trump is what I ought to call him, is that a lot of people are excited. And he's got a lot of attention of the same type of apparatus that would have paid attention to AOC and Bernie. And there's no, trick about that. They're the same people running the actual campaign. I guarantee it. Not to mention on a broader level, on a national level. And, so there's a lot of kind of reaction. Here's this young guy, charismatic guy, nice guy. Looks like he's got the upper hand in a city mayor's race in New York City, which is a den of thieves. And Cuomo has been a part of the racket for a long time. And, the other guy who was on the subways back in the 70s, trying to rid himself of crime. He's just been like a big, kind of a personality. His name's on the tip of my tongue. In New York forever. But this guy Zoran, whose mother I think was a filmmaker, and I'm not sure what his dad did, but his idea for, meeting the needs of the New York citizenry head on is to create affordability issues in housing and transportation and other scenarios to where their lives aren't so impossible to manage because of everything else I'm telling you, right? And so, of course, all the big billionaires in New York City have waged a huge campaign to protect a former governor who was involved with, I think, 13 different sex related cases, in the van of sexual harassment and that sort of thing. But this platform by Zoran is very, very limited in scope. But because things are so just out of control, stupid, that everybody is like, oh my God, if he can win, that'll give us this opportunity to take back the midterms and ride this wave of no kings and come up with a plan that's going to rid ourselves of everything that Donald Trump is, and maybe MAGA and maybe the billionaire apparatus that created it all. But they're not, because they don't have a plan. They don't know what to do. They don't have any sort of capacity to build a platform, let alone an understanding of what actually happened. But the Democrats, for the most part, the senior ones, are in on it. And like my colleague, and I can't believe I called him my colleague because he's my mentor, he's the guy who's taught me everything. But just in terms of what we're attempting to do, William K. Black points out in everything he says recently is that it's not just no kings, it's no oligarchs. It's the system, it's the methodology, it's this apparatus. And the apparatus that I say is the billionaire apparatus that we gave tens of trillions of dollars illegally to for the biggest crime, financial crime in the history of the world, which is a crime against humanity. I don't know how many people died from suicide. I don't know how many people were made homeless. I don't know how many people went crazy. I don't know how many people got bankrupt. I don't know how many people were divorced. But the collateral consequences of that to families and everything else is absolutely insane. And that was the beginning. And of course, that would lead up to the COVID era, the first Trump administration, J6, and everything that came during the Biden administration and after. And, I'll just point out a couple of things before really closing this up. The entirety, and I saw this on one of my Substack feeds the other day, where somebody was trying to compare. It was actually this morning, and it was after Trump, I believe, mentioned Biden 42 times. It's like he's got this unbelievable crush on Biden's legacy because he just is like, he can't go a sentence without saying, Biden was the worst president in history and he's the reason all of these things are happening. Of course, in trying to answer questions about the fact that SNAP benefits, and I think someone posed earlier today, I wish Nora would have asked Trump to, give the definition of what SNAP is. And I thought that was pretty damn funny as well. And the nature of Biden being in the mix was such that, and I had to respond to this, was that, yeah, Biden actually did have a lot of good things going on. At the same time, they chose to hide what had become his increasing dementia. We know that BlackRock was calling the scenes, especially the last year and a half. And they call the scenes for Trump too, by the way, BlackRock, Blackstone, the whole consortium. But there was some huge mistakes that the Democrats made that are the same mistakes they're making now. And they will make the same mistakes in the future, all the way through potentially the midterms, and be the only party in history that has probably a massive mandate by the American people where they'll completely screw it up because they don't have a vision. They don't have a plan because they're tethered to the billionaire class that I am trying to get you to understand has been pissing on your head, telling you it's rain for now 14 years. Trump is the ultimate consequence of this situation. And to just add one more just absolute outrage by way of, what Nora O'Donnell had kind of teased last night. She said, you're getting ready for a state visit from the Saudi Arabian Prince Bandar, or MBS, right, is his abbreviation. I was about to say Bandar bin Sultan, which is a bit of a slip considering what I'm about to say, but MBS was not connected to 9/11. He was too young. He wasn't in the mix, but Saudi Arabia sure as hell was. And we've never solved 9/11. And that's part and parcel to this whole situation. And he's going to be coming to the White House, right? This after, and Nora didn't get to ask this question, and nor did she probably even think about it, or would she have been allowed to, right? So your son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and your former Secretary of the Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, put together a hedge fund with a $6 billion deal with Saudi Arabia. How much are you getting a piece of that? Oh, by the way, did you know that the FBI and the CIA knew exactly where the terrorist cells were right before 9/11, and we knew who were paying them? Did you know that? Mr. Know Everything, a guy that's got his fingers on the pulse of everything and is the greatest leader of all time and wants to put himself up in South Dakota, right? Among the founding fathers or the most notable presidents in our country's history. So, yeah, it's all absurd. I call it the Mad Magazine Mad King and this Monty Python flying circus of shit. And of course, we saw the AI, um, you know, cartoon of Trump doing the exact same thing on all protesters around the country, which was, if that doesn't piss you off, I don't know what else will. In addition to starving 42 million people while he gets backdoored 5 billion people. But how does all of that happen without the structure of what it is that I'm revealing to you? And again, compare and contrast what I'm telling you. All of this stuff has been horrible throughout Trump's administration, but prior to that, we literally had over 150 million victims of a crime so widespread that it brought the entire global system to its knees, that they pulled all these backdoor tricks to provide tens of trillions of dollars illegally to the most outrageous criminals on the planet, which made all of this possible. And so, what we're in the midst of, in addition to everything else, is several weeks ago, Trump declared war on the podium at the UN on renewables. We know where he gets his money. I obviously just talked about Saudi Arabia. He wants to destroy the sciences. He wants to destroy the media to provide truth. He's not once, he is. These are all in service to a king, a dictator, this unbelievably ungodly, baffling moment of complete stupidity. And, a lot of people are like, again, who are you? Right? Well, I'm a guy that's gone the distance, but I don't see, a pedigree to your last name, like a PhD, or maybe you don't even have a law degree. So who are you to tell me all of these things? Well, I became an investigative journalist and I had a multi-million-dollar budget to go learn all of these things and get the evidence to put that forward. And I've got hundreds of more hours on the shelf that I haven't been able to get out there because I got quashed by the board. Because if you look back, for example, at the 2024 election, when Alvin Bragg in the East Southern District of Manhattan got 34 felony convictions against Donald Trump for obviously the porn star, whose name I can't think of at the moment, because I keep thinking Fonnie Willis. I don't know what's wrong with me. That's hilarious that I'm putting those two things together. I know you know who I'm thinking of, right? In fact, she's really lived through misery as well these past little while. In fact, nobody's even paying attention to her, right? Kind of like the victims of the Epstein scenario, which ties into this. So, look, the 34 felony convictions were based on David Pecker's quashing Stormy Daniels' story. And that was because she slept with him. Think about what they do if you had $71 trillion on them, right? That they stole illegally. Again, Donald Trump, 5 billion. I mean, that's a pittance compared. There's 1,000 billion and a trillion. Now, granted, Wall Street's a lot bigger than one guy, but Wall Street's approximately 300,000 people when you're talking about all of these different apparatuses of private equity and hedge funds and asset management and so on and so forth. Yeah, we're talking $71 trillion to that apparatus. To do what? To destroy the law, to destroy our democracy, to become that which we were born to revolt against. And who's got the plan? Nobody's got the plan. I've got the plan, Stan. And it's the Clean New Deal. And you can find it at www.thecleannewdeal.org. And I didn't consider this earlier, but I think what I'm going to do, if I can, is I am going to try to share my screen. Oh, that's why I'm looking at the wrong thing. So if I can share my screen and I go to, okay, let's take a look here. If I am hopefully on, okay, I was re-looking at this New York Times article about, are we already autocratic? Are we over the Rubicon from the New York Times in Trump's America? And oh yeah, of course we are. It's a rhetorical question. So I punch out the cleannewdeal.org, okay? And when you get this, you can Why am I not seeing here? Do you not see it on my screen? Hold on 1 second. All right, so there we go. You can see the screen now. So when you go to the Clean New Deal, you'll just see that uh, it's it walks you through the reality. We don't have a democracy. We're not a capitalist system. We don't have free markets. The law is unequal. We don't have separation of powers. Corruption rules everything. Many of you have heard of Project 2025. This is the answer. This is the answer that the billionaires don't want you to know, but the people have got to wrap their heads around because of the information that I'm providing to you. So, I lay all of this stuff out, and more importantly, as you scroll down, it identifies the problem, the solution, and what we must do. And it uncovers the truth with all of these different chapters, right? So I provide you, what we're going to do, or all of the information that I have and why. And then it takes you to, is this the America we want? Because obviously it's not what tens of millions of you want, as demonstrated by the No Kings rally. Do we hold these truths to be self evident? Well, of course not. That's a rhetorical question because the founding fathers are rolling in their graves, as did everybody who died saving the United States from foreign versions of what we've become. I don't know why I would have to actually beleaguer that point, but there are millions of people out there that get confused by that. You don't understand what an absolute, I don't know, calamity this is. And so I describe who I am, what I'm all about, and then basically, now you got to understand that we've got all of the story on Trump's criminality. I've spent a lot of time on this. I'm not a Trump expert, but I do interact with many people who are, which helped me get this information, which takes us to what our reality is. Like I mentioned at the outset of this, one of the people that I interact with recently had stated that, you know what, I'm steeped in reality and I'm just trying to get through this murkiness of all of the stuff that's happening around me to get to clarity of what we are so I know what to do about it. Because when people get that far through the different layers of what we need to do, they inevitably get to, okay, now wait a second. Now I'm starting to understand the problem. So what's the solution? Well, we've got that here too. What are we going to do? And I lay it out. Here's the solution. Join the fight. What are we going to do? It has it all there in black and white. And I would love for you guys to get this to millions of people as quickly as you can, because it's going to take literally tens of millions of us to show that there is a will by the American people that have their eyes on the prize, that we're not getting tooled and basically like we're sheep, being huddled by the money to get us into certain camps so that we're going to vote for people that the gatekeepers have already approved for us. And I've already mentioned the senior leadership of the Democratic Party, but you've got to ask yourself, can someone lead us out of this madness if they've been a part of it the whole time? And again, it's a rhetorical question. You can't. And who am I? Well, the guy you haven't heard of because of all of the information I have. Am I legitimate? Yeah, do your own research. I've got, I think, 690, and I mentioned that at the outset of this dialogue, 690 truth bombs. You can kind of go into every one and you'll see the same theme over and over, which is remarkable. But it's the work that I have that we've put out there that enables you to really fully understand it. And again, our work in the con, quite frankly, my first film, Forward 13, Waking Up the American Dream, which you can find on YouTube, and you can do it through the portal of Corruption Incorporated. But what we also do is just lay out the precepts of the Clean New Deal. And those are, look, everything, you can't believe your eyes, right? It's like you're taught that we're all free, that everybody's voice matters, but then you look around and you're like, wait a second, that's BS. Well, yeah, it is BS because of loopholes in the system that create diabolical deception that can actually, obviously piss on your head telling you it's right. So the four questions are: what is qualified immunity? Police immunity? What is judicial immunity? What is presidential immunity? And what is the electoral college? That's how the system can hold you back, hold you down, and make sure that authoritarianism can thrive and defeat democracy. And if we're going to defeat them, we're going to know how they're doing it. And that's the Rubik's Cube for those of you who came from the 80s. You put all the sides together and you understand what we have to do. And that gets you to the precepts. And by the way, I'm not going to go through them all here because I'd really like you to watch them yourself, but they're all right there. and then it just defines what all of those elements are, and then it puts you together, and then ultimately, let's take a look. The white papers. Now, this is the most important part. The Federal Reserve Act 13.3. This is the evidence. If you're a journalist, especially, there's things here like a detailed look at the Fed's bailout by funding facility and recipient. But more importantly, the audio interview with Raj and Cohen of Sullivan and Cromwell from 2010. Right there is probably the most important interview of all time that millions of you don't understand, that basically backdoored tens of trillions of dollars illegally to create this insane racket of billionaires. And then ultimately, I think I've got and in fact I know I do, what is the Federal Reserve Act 13.3? In here somewhere, it basically lays out the statutes. Well, I did it right here, the illegal actions of the Federal Reserve. So it shows you the statutes when you click on that, and you can just get into that. So and then support and everything else. But look, there is no time to lose, my friends. There's literally, I mean, if the, climate change is your issue, and I'm going to see if I can't. There's no time to lose. Everything is on the line. It has been for years. Just millions of you are just now catching up because Don is shoving a giant, enormous shit sandwich down everybody's throat like they're waterboarding you. And there's nowhere to run. There's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to turn. I mean, I feel like I want to end with this sort of scenario, right? Look, I don't know about you, but sometimes I love to go on AI and I ask questions, and I'm kind of a curious guy, and I love to get kind of just the magic of the universe. And it always boggles my mind to think that the Big Bang came from the singularity 13.8 billion years ago to create infinity. And there's this process within that, right? It's the convergence of atoms with 118 compounds in the periodic table that come together to create how all of the things in the universe operate. And that's just the nature of how the universe works. And the energy necessary to propel the universe outward in every direction simultaneously came from energy. And a couple of other things that blow my mind too. When you think about the Earth is almost proportional exactly at the equator and the prime meridian. I think there's a difference of like less than 200, 300 miles over the course of 24,800, 900 miles in both directions, right? And so the Earth's a little bit flatter at the poles, a little bit rounder at the equator. And yet it's this magical planet that houses life in the only known place in this universe in our solar system, somewhere between 100 and 400 billion stars, maybe 400 billion planets, in a universe of 2 trillion known galaxies. And many of these galaxies have billions and billions of stars, hundreds of billions of stars. And the known universe in terms of its observable size is 93 billion light years. And I think the light year is 4.5 trillion dollar mixing metaphors, 5 trillion miles per year. I think it's like 300,000 miles per second, right? Those are enormous numbers. Those are enormous odds for life to exist. For what? To have the most powerful country in the history of mankind, have this idiot as our president, steamrolling everything. How could you do that? Stupidity, ignorance, conformity, complicity, cowardness, people who are on the dark side. What we need to do is we need to get tens of millions of people on the same page. You need to understand that this number that I'm providing to you, and I didn't finish off with the think about that in terms of if a light year is like roughly 4 to 5 trillion light years miles per year, and the observable universe is 93 billion in its width, I think is really kind of but how do you do the width? That's the thing that kind of throws me off. But I'm trying to paint the picture of people. You're tiny and insignificant, but yet you're everything. That's my philosophy. It always has been. So my call to action is you've got to understand that when you meet and everyone you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in liberty and justice and sustainability and dignity and decency and dignity and integrity above all else that keeps it together. When we merge in unity behind the Clean New Deal, we'll purge the misery of tyranny to unleash the renaissance of possibility, which means you've got to stop buying lies and you've got to stop lying. Lying is intentional, but to me, it's kind of like, well, is ignorance bliss? No, it's not in law. And the fact is, it's not rocket science, it's racketeering. Okay. Become the nuclear reaction vector to the big bang of truth that I'm dropping. Why? Because when you go through the Clean New Deal and you see the precepts of the Clean New Deal based on understanding by re-engineering the lies that manifest power for the few that are deceiving us, when you blow the hole through their whole litany of lies, you create this renaissance of truth. And truth is integrity, and you have to have integrity. And is truth, subjective? No. You fly a plane, you get data. Every scientific achievement is truth in its own way. And we're not talking about truth of whether or not you believe in God or whether or not you think I'm the deliverer or the savior or anything else. No, the truth is the savior. And God, there was something on the tip of my tongue that was just a great way to close this out. And wouldn't you know, I fumbled. It doesn't matter. I got to do these things every single day, and I guess I'll get tighter and tighter. You got to believe me. There's nobody else in the country that has the information I have that's willing to reveal it in the context of everything that's going on. Nobody I think I will say this. So I do like the folks that are the leaders, even though they're not self-proclaimed leaders. They're just people that are involved, that help, interviewers interview, in the event that they want to know more about No Kings. But these guys are like, yeah, it's all about you guys, right? And it's Ezra Levin and Leah Greenberg, and they're two young, very smart people that are pretty much the face of, Indivisible / No Kings, but they don't have a plan. And who are they tied to? They've definitely got an infrastructure. I guarantee you that. I guarantee you there's big players within the DNC that are like, okay, let's find a young, very thoughtful, very connected people that we can trust to be able to try to build this, and we'll give resources to it, and we'll bring everybody together. And I've been to 3 No Kings rallies where everybody is proffering the right questions on the signs, but there is no movement. And I stood in front of my local rally. Fortunately, the local Indivisible group thought that I should be able to give a presentation because I'm involved with the New Untouchables, and we've got a legal solution to be able to turn the tables on Trump using whistleblowers and state legislatures to work around NDAs to get subpoena power to blow these things sky high, because 60 Minutes can't do it. So we're going to do it. But that's part and parcel. That's kind of like level 1. The Clean New Deal is everything else. You got to think paradigmatically, you've got to think huge, and you've got to believe that. And also, and I said this in one of my recent truth bombs, we've got great swag on our website, but there's one in particular that has this artistic rendition of somebody pushing up, like Atlas, a boulder of truth up to the peak of the mountain. And then there's a whole bunch of people behind him that if they get on board and push that truth to the mountain, it will become the largest wrecking ball of the carnage of corruption in history, because the truth will always win. But you've just got to find it. And the problem with media today is there's so much information, there's so much misinformation, there's so many liars out there that you can't see the forest for the trees. I've got the information that can save democracy, that can save the country, that can save the world. Because if you want to find a way out of fossil fuel monopolies that have complete control of the paradigm because of what's going on in the Trump administration, responsible for 9/11, the last 20 years of war, and then going to be, carnage of climate catastrophe on the one planet that we know that can sustain life. Although I will say, for those of you out there that are watching this and say, well, there's probably a lot of life out there. Yeah, I agree. But still, that doesn't change the remarkable distance between other places that life can exist. It's a miracle we have what we have. We just have to come together for the power of freedom, dynamism, and knowledge, and all of those things that do make us great, to purge these freaking morons. That's all they are. They're just idiots, okay? And I don't want to be an American idiot. So thanks for listening. I don't think that was great, but you know what? Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Thank you. Please like and subscribe. Please share. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. Check out the description for other links that I think you'll find helpful. All the best.